we all have an aversion to the idea of a king or a boss lording it over us. That's part of that law. It's a pattern of being and how to be in relation to existence. We're all attracted to powerful places of natural beauty. We're all attracted to, eating uncontaminated foods, eating, if any of us eats a fish in the right season, the peak fat season, we all feel that same rightness about it. We all know it's there, that law is going through us all the time, and we all know it. It's just a matter of allowing yourself to live it without insisting that your story or your opinion is the way that everybody should be.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stokely. I hope you're doing well out there. Today I have the opportunity to speak to Tyson Yunkaporta. He's a senior lecturer of Indigenous Knowledge at Deakin University and the author of an incredibly potent book titled Sand Talk. I feel real grateful to have this opportunity to speak with Tyson, especially as we are entering another 6-week stint of heightened restrictions here in Melbourne. Tyson and I have a vast-ranging conversation as we freeze a fragment of knowledge in time, as Tyson likes to put it. So I'm not going to let too much out about the conversation. I'm just going to let it unfold as it did for me in that moment in time that it was. And I really appreciated the yarn, and I look forward to having another one soon. So I'd like to invite you to join us in paying respects to the people and the other beings everywhere who keep the law of the land. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of all the places where this podcast is created and listened to. And we pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'd like to take this time to make a special mention to the Apalech Clan of Western Cape York in far north Queensland, the clan that Tyson calls his own. So I really hope you enjoy the conversation. And if you do enjoy it, please let us know at Stokely Podcast on Instagram, or just use it to spark a conversation in your own life. That's what it's all about, maintaining the art of conversation. So I really hope you enjoy it, and we'll speak to you soon.
Hey.
Hey, Tyson, how are you?
Not too bad. How you doing?
Good, man.
Sorry, I'm just trying to make this work. There. I'm just I'm trying to get this baby to sleep right now. So yeah.
That's right. Do you want to start us off with singing a lullaby for the baby, and we can all just tune in.
Neil Dutton, Ian Kins Kenyan, and frog. Neil Dutton, Ian Kins Kenyan, and frog. Neil Dutton, Ian Kins Kenyan, wine and oh and min and gal and frog.
Nice one.
It'll probably just stir him up. No, there we go. He's sitting up again. Yeah. He's a maniac.
All right. You probably shouldn't take advice from someone who doesn't have kids, mate. No, lullabies don't work these days.
Yeah. It's just lockdown. So I'm on the clock now. I'm working and trying to dash off emails and write and do references for academic papers and stuff like that while I'm trying to get him to sleep. It's just it's insane. Lockdown with babies.
Yeah.
And working from home is it's a hell of a challenge, eh?
It's and welcome to the next 6 weeks of some more lockdown, eh?
Yeah, it's gonna get more interesting before it gets less interesting.
Tyson, I've noticed you've been just on the podcast circuit and interview circuit lately because of your book Sand Talk. Mate, how's that been going into that world?
It's just an extra layer of work. It sort of maps on top of like an already impossible lifestyle. But yeah, I like doing the podcast. So I think I mentioned in the book that that's as soon as you write something down, it's just you're only freezing a fragment of knowledge in time.
Yeah.
Like people think that the book is the thing. The book isn't the thing. quick. And I say that, 5 minutes after I've written it, it'll already be out of date,
Yeah.
the book. So yeah, you can read the book, but it's more than that. It's all the yarns and projects and relationships and networks and things that spring out of that, and all the innovations. And it's been quite remarkable. It's been since last September. So, it's coming up on a year now since the book came out. And it just so many people have been doing so many amazing things, and not just literally with the things that are in the book, but with themselves, with what's new about them in their thinking, and what directions that's taken them in. So they're just designing new models of things and how things can work, and they're implementing them everywhere, and amazing things are happening. So we're doing a VR AR sort of version of the book, and the knowledge has changed so much with all the people who are interacting with it that it's pretty much nothing like the book, and I'm barely even in it. The next one, my voice, my presence is almost not even there, because it's more about the communities of practice that are springing up, that sort of sprang up around it, and then went into spore mode and went everywhere doing their amazing work. So yeah, the knowledge has moved.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
that's a new age spin on sand talking. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to sort of change what a book could be and what a book could be for, and just from that perspective, that was successful. Yeah.
What were your hopes with the book and putting it out there?
They were fairly limited. I thought that it would be maybe 1,000 or a couple of thousand people reading it, and that I'd be able to manage those relationships.
Wow.
And find, find people who could think like that and work like that, and just quietly get on with some work with them was kind of the goal. But it took off a lot more. So I insisted that most of the marketing was done by word of mouth, sort of by the grapevine.
Mm-hmm.
But that actually turned out to be a lot more powerful than I imagined it would be. And so, word of mouth has actually ended up meaning that it's sold a lot.
Yep.
And now far many more relationships than I can manage. So I kind of have to step back from them a bit, and sort of this long form podcast that's emerged as a genre in the last few years. It's kind of like it's the new campfire, I think. And so a lot of people are still stuck in, I don't know, all the Generation X and Y sort of thing. They're all sort of like, no, everything's got to be quick and a few minutes long. It's got to be immediate, and people's attention spans are really, really short, So nothing can be longer than 5 minutes. It's got to be quick, and you've got to say it fast and get it out there. Because there's this big disrespect for, consumers of media out there, that they have short attention spans. But Netflix knows this is bullshit. Netflix knows that people want to spend 3 days binging something. People take their time. They take their time with their information now. It's not as lightning fast as sort of, that mythology suggests.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got this long form podcast. Joe Rogan sits around for 3 or 4 hours just drinking whiskey and chatting with people, and it's the most popular podcast on the planet. It is the new campfire, and people want to have the yarns and take their time around them, and then they want to go beyond the podcast and keep them going. So anyway, podcast is the way that I'm trying to manage all these new relationships, which is way beyond the Dunbar number or anything else.
Yeah. Wow.
The Dunbar number is, for anybody who doesn't know, that's like the maximum amount of people that you can know and have relationships with, which is around 150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty fascinating when you look at it like that, and you've got these social media platforms that allow you to have thousands of connections, but what do they really mean?
They're weak. They're weak connections. They're not really relationships. but when you write a book, you know, and you're writing it largely in the dual first person plural. So I use that us too a lot.
Yeah.
You know, to reference that relationship. When you're writing a book like that, you're kind of making a relationship with somebody, which is, it's quite intimate. And so, you know, everybody who contacts me, they feel like they know me. Hang on a sec, I got to grab this boy.
I guess while we're waiting, I could probably just say that Tyson Yunkaporta is the author of Sand Talk, subtitled How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World. And he's also a senior lecturer of Indigenous Knowledge at Deakin University. Yeah, he's put out an incredible book that definitely is causing some reverberations around Australia, especially. Word of mouth, as he said, has been the one medium of marketing, and as they say, recommendation and word of mouth is the best form of marketing you can have. He belongs to the Apalech Clan of far north Queensland, which is his place, I guess you would say, maybe his clan land or his homeland, his tribal land. It's a long way away from where we're sitting right now in Melbourne during the coronavirus lockdown, but it's it's hopefully a place we can chat about soon.
Okay. How you doing?
Oh, good, mate.
Sorry about that. You know, this the podcast thing is important to me. It's not to anybody else in my house. Like, you know,
I almost felt bad reaching out. I was like, oh, here we go. Sorry, Tyson.
It's just, you know, it doesn't excuse you from any other duties that are going on. So I know this seems unprofessional. It's probably terrible. I just walk around doing house duties, but you'd never get to switch that off.
Well, it's definitely it's definitely real. It's real life, mate. So don't excuse yourself from that. So if you were gonna manage these relationships that came out of the book, how did you envisage that to happen? What did you really think you were going to be able to do with 1,000 new relationships?
Well, with it just basically start. I mean, the idea is everything is in twos, right? Everything's in twos. There's no just one thing. So everything in nature is in twos. Or human networks are, you know, clusters of pairs. There are always those pairs, you know, and you know, preferably those pairs. Well, usually in a natural system, in a complex dynamic system or adaptive system, those pairs will be things that are quite dissimilar to each other, dissimilar from each other. They're not like, you know, two peas in a pod. You know, things are paired with other things. So, you know, ants and yabbies kind of thing, you know, like totemically, but also, you know, in your ecosystem. And, you know, humans the same in human networks. So I guess I was hoping to just network people and link up people together in lots and lots of different combinatorials of twos and threes. So if you've got 1,000 people, there's 1 billion potential combinatorials of three in there.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking of working with a sort of a small number of people like that and building a bit of a pattern. That would then, I mean, that, yeah. I've tried it with, I spent, I don't know, in the years before the book, I spent about half a dozen years trying to do that with just around 150 people. I was doing it with that Dunbar number thing.
Mm-hmm.
And my idea was that, you know, I'd create that pattern and it'd be, you know, like inserting a virus into the system, and then it would just like spread sort of throughout and sort of bring things more into a complex dynamic system kind of pattern rather than this tinkered complicated monolithic thing that we're trying to survive at the moment. That was the plan, and I spent 6 years on it, and it all fell apart, you know. And you know, it's about governance. You know, people, like, they see something beautiful emerging, and so, you know, of course, there's that narcissism straight away. People want to know who's going to be the boss of it, you know, and so they're looking at me, and I'm like, no, I'm not boss. There's no boss here. We're not doing boss.
Yeah.
And so then everybody just sees, I think they think of it as an ecological niche for a fucking apex predator or something, some Mufasa role that they'll be able to, and so everybody sees that role open and start fighting over that. And, you know, it all just kind of fell apart, you know, because there was this kind of programming that everybody had around these hierarchies, and so in they went. It just didn't work, that one. It's hard to make a community within this bigger thing. But I thought I could experiment with 1,000 or 2,000 people when I was thinking about all those billion combinatorials that could happen in there. And that's what gives rise to emergence, this idea in complexity theory of emergence. That's where things, just magical things, happen. Yeah. They don't say, because they're scientists, they don't call it magic, but for me it's magical. You know, these perfect entities and patterns and phenomena emerge. Just like life, for example, you know, that emerged, you know, out of a complex system that kept just doing these infinite combinatorials over time, over deep time, and life emerged from that.
Yeah.
So this idea of emergence was what I was hoping to create with a couple of thousand people, and then all of a sudden it's tens of thousands, and it's just like, oh, fuck me, that's not going to work. Yeah, so I'm just trying to do all these. Lots and lots and lots of these kind of new campfires and try and do each one different and try it to very different people. And I'm not just going with the big ones, like I'm doing some big ones, but a lot of them I'm just doing, you know. Narelle down the road's decided she's going to do a podcast because she's bored, and you know, she's got like 12 listeners, and I'll do that. And then, like, you know, that group of 12, they're like, then they form a group, and they're really, and then they want to talk. So then I'm going in on Zooms with them, and then they're recording those. And, you know, so I don't know, I'm doing little ones and little things and big things, but it's just, and trying to be as diverse as possible in all the different messages and things I'm putting out, try and make each one a bit different.
Yeah.
But still, I can't help it. Like sometimes I just stumble across like a cool idea, and just, it's mimetically like just beautiful. Like this idea, one of them popped out, something just emerged, okay, out of this dynamic yarn we were having about a week ago. What was it? That empathy is just like training wheels for people who don't know how to relate yet. So it was just like this little phrase like that. And then so out that came, and then I found myself last night saying that in another podcast as well. You know, so sometimes I repeat myself. Yeah, but I try and just...
Let's break that one down a bit more. Empathy is just like training wheels.
Yeah,
people who can't relate.
Well, so Aboriginal cultures, we all get lumped in with all the soft skills stuff, you know. The, you know, sociable, relational kind of stuff, and yeah, that's true. But then that doesn't really map very well onto the kind of new age corporate positive psychology sort of ideals of, you know, your mindfulness PDF instructions and your servant leadership and you know, all these little books and stuff that come out and these little things that get taken up in organizations. And, you know, empathy is a big one recently, and people are sort of seeing that as an Eastern thing and as a kind of a, you know, an Indigenous thing. And empathy is something like you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. But if you are actually in relation to somebody, then why do you need empathy? If you're actually, so the actual Indigenous idea of being in relation is that you are profoundly connected with that other entity. So why would you need to mediate that with something like empathy? You don't need to put yourself in their shoes. You're in their shoes. You're in each other's shoes all the time.
Yeah.
And even when you're apart, there's that in quantum physics, they got that idea of entanglement.
Yeah.
Entanglement theory. So particles, once they become associated, no matter how distant they are, they could be on the other side of the world, they still respond to each other in real time. So there is this kind of quantum entanglement of Indigenous relationships. And when I say Indigenous, I mean, really, that's just human, like what humans are supposed to be. And, a lot of Indigenous people are domesticated as hell now and are not experiencing that anymore. And a lot of, I don't know, non-Indigenous people are actually existing in that state of relatedness. So you can't even have that kind of dichotomy anymore either. But just, why do you need to mediate your relationships with entity if they're real relationships? They're real relationships. You don't have to have empathy for a person because you just are that person. You're a pair. You're us two.
I wanted to, you just touched on it then, like how there's a couple of things I want to pull out of that. The word Indigenous and your understanding of it as it not being really like a great word that you want to, I guess, not that you don't want to use it, but you feel like there's a misunderstanding of that word or misuse of that word.
With everybody. I saw this cultural awareness training course the other day, and they showed a video with, asking questions of all these different Indigenous people and getting all the different answers. And one of the answers is, so what do I call you? Is it Aboriginal? Is it Indigenous? Is it Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander? And every single one of those answers was different.
Yeah,
from the Indigenous people there. But every single one of those answers was angry too. Like, no, I hate that word. Don't say that word. Don't say Aboriginal. I hate that word Aboriginal. It's like you're saying I'm abnormal or something. Abnormal. Don't say that. No, I'm not Aboriginal. I like Indigenous. And it's like, Indigenous, it's a stupid word, I said, no. And I don't like any of them. You call me Murray or Gamilaroi or, whatever my people are. And so everybody's got, it's like I say in the book, it's just anything that you're going to call any of us is going to be one person's preferred term and another person's offensive label.
Yeah.
So it's not like I don't hate any of them. It's just like I'll just cycle through randomly and throw them out there because someone's going to get annoyed and someone will be happy. But then I'll switch it up so 5 minutes later they can change places. I don't get annoyed about any of them. It's just if we're going to start picking away at that, we're speaking English, and English does that with everything. There isn't anything you can say that's going to be true or right. English doesn't work for, actually describing an ontology where people are belonging in any way within a landscape or within a system. It's a whole heap of highly individualized particles going around doing their own thing, and English facilitates that. That's what English does. The English was created. It was a trade creole, like a mishmash of about 12 different languages. That and English doesn't come out of a place or a people. The actual the original Angles, they would be fucking horrified. The ones that originally, migrated to England, they'd be horrified if they found out what Anglish has become and what Anglo culture has become. It's like, what have you done? What have you done? What you carved up all the land into squares, and that's capital now that you leverage for debt to make more investment and then gamble on futures on that into infinity. What the hell are you doing? You can't foreclose on land for debt and take it off somebody. That's inalienable. I mean, you can take it off them with an axe, but that's the land, and that's for everybody. If somebody wants to camp on, the bit of land that you're living on, they're fully entitled to. If they want to catch a fish out of the stream, anybody can come and pick mushrooms in your forest or anything they want. That's that Angle culture.
Yeah.
And I know we got a bad picture of Vikings because they did a bit of raiding and theft, but it was a hell of a lot nicer than the current Anglo culture. And I think the Angles would be horrified if they saw what the world has done with it to create this Anglosphere, which is just like this horrendous sort of pustulant skin over the face of the earth at the moment. It just doesn't reflect. So are you Anglo?
Am
Like
I?
Anglo, like culturally? Are you ethnic Anglo? You've got a name that's like Magel or
it's a bit different, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more European, yeah. Like my parents are both.
Backhausen.
That's German,
is that
mate.
Dutch
That's
or
German.
German. Sweet.
They did some things. Hey, so
see, I've got a Torres Strait Islander mate. His name's Vincent Backhouse.
Oh, really?
He's got similar surname. Now, Vincent, he was born a Torres Strait Islander, an Australian citizen. Back in the day when Queensland still owned New Guinea.
Yeah, right.
Are you aware of that history? So Queensland owned New Guinea under the same law of just popping a flag on the beach and saying that's mine, that Australia was colonized.
Yeah.
But the United Nations sort of saw that and went, what the hell are you doing? You can't, like, you don't even have a treaty.
Wow.
You can't just own New Guinea because you say you own it. Give it. Don't even you give it back. We're giving it back.
Yeah.
Step back. And they backed off. Queensland backed off and allowed New Guinea to be New Guinea again and have its independence. And it only backed off because it realized that, oh my God, that's the same way we took this whole freaking continent. We'd better keep that quiet because it's illegal. So that would mean Australia is an illegal settlement. So anyway, I've got to tell you about Vincent Backhouse. So he was born, in the Torres Strait Islands, but sort of closer to New Guinea.
Yeah.
So he was an Australian Indigenous person when he was born. But then when the UN drew the invisible line across the sea to go, well, that's New Guinea territory, his island fell on the wrong side of that. So suddenly he had to be an immigrant coming back into Australia when he was about 10 years old.
Right.
And so suddenly he wasn't Australian Indigenous anymore on his mother's side. He was a foreigner. From this invisible line in the sea.
Yeah.
So that's all kind of interesting, isn't it? All these temporary, movable, invisible borders that are just on bits of paper and bits of code flying around. It's so.
I mean, it fucking churns my stomach to think of it, how it all goes down like that sometimes, and it's still happening now. Like, people are still fighting over land on this 2D plane as well. What's going to happen when we start getting into space and then we segregate it in 3D and like there are these different levels in the sky that we, like 10,000 meters to 35,000 meters, that whole layer of the atmosphere is owned by, I don't know, Australia, and then we start dissecting it in 3D. Like,
look, it's just insane. There's always new frontiers. They'll make them up if they haven't got them.
Yeah.
They'll just speculate on future frontiers. And
are we going to be looking?
Half this economy is just on made up sort of things that add zeros to a screen.
Do you think we're going to be looking at people, like, it's obviously not going to happen, but if we knew what people were doing in 5,000 years' time, we would also be like the people 5,000 years before us and just go, how are you even thinking that's a good thing? Like, like, is that ever going to stop, or are we going to reach this theoretical tipping point?
It's a blip. It's a blip that, started 12 or 13,000 years ago. Just that ridiculous idea of a civilization, that ridiculous idea of making a city that had to be in a state of constant growth or it would collapse. And so therefore had to suck all of its land base dry until it turns into desert, and then has to keep going out and killing everybody else just to keep feeding the city until it inevitably collapses. It's an insane model. I don't know how it got any traction.
Story, eh? Everyone believed into the
Yeah,
story of it.
but I guess it's that same thing. It's I guess hierarchies. The idea of a permanent hierarchy is an addictive idea, and it's the same as that experiment that I ran before with that 150 people, where I tried to make that pattern happen, but it fell apart because people wanted wanted to fill that spot at the top and change it around. Yeah.
And that builds into, I'd love to get your, I know you've rounded off so many times, but your definition of narcissism and its existence in the world that we live in.
Yeah. And that it just comes down to that a very basic unit of just a wrong thought. And I guess this is it. It just hasn't been around for 12,000 years. It's been around since creation began. There's that little seed of that just wrong idea, that idea of I am greater than. And all, human social systems for most of human history have been designed specifically in a myriad of ways to deal with that problem and to contain the excesses of that thought. So all human systems, we've been organized into societies where the idea of a supreme leader is a permanent leader is anathema to us as human beings. We're happy to have temporary leaders for a particular project or something we're working on. And we're happy for leadership to change hands in different contexts as different skill sets are needed, as you move across the landscape as human beings. But there is an instinct that we all have in our human communities against somebody rising above everybody else. And we police that quite rigorously and always have. And we do it, we're still driven to do that now. If somebody is just consumed with hubris and assuming that they're above everyone else in the room, you'll find it won't be long before everyone in that room, no matter what culture they belong to, is bringing that person down.
Yeah.
Unless that person assembles some respected people in the room to be their lieutenants, and then suddenly everybody wants to cluster around that, and that's when it all falls apart. Whatever they're doing in that room won't last for long, whether it's a party or a meeting or whatever. It's going to fall apart pretty quick. It's that narcissism when you put yourself above other people, other non-human beings, the land itself, put yourself above the land. The land exists for me to use and to take things from. It's the source of all human misery.
Is a tool that is used that I feel like has not been taken into this kind of age and society, like a rites of passage to break that seed or kind of manage that seed before it grows into narcissistic adults and then the effect that has.
That's to get rid of that. There's a spin-off from the greater than thing, or maybe even a precursor to it, and that's the idea of I am special. The idea of that you're special somehow, and that's what rites of passage extinguishes in a human being. It gets rid of that notion that they're special, and so it's painful and it's terrifying, because in most human cultures, and still today, Indigenous cultures, but a lot of places around the world, your childhood is all about, you are the center of the universe. You're special, and you've got all these people around you who are know you to be special and who love you because you're special. Uncles, aunties, mums, dads, grandparents, everybody. So rites of passage are sort of a cutoff point of, right, okay, you've experienced that and enjoyed that. Now we've got to tell you you're not special. And it hurts really badly. But then you realize that everybody else isn't special either. So it's okay, I'm not beneath anybody, no one's above me. And then you realize, but we all belong to something special. We're all doing something special. We're custodial people. We're custodians of creation here, and we're doing that together. We have special work to do. That is satisfying for human beings. It satisfies you at every level. And as long as you don't ever let that seed come in and take over again, that I am greater than deception, then you'll be right. You'll have a decent life. Unless there's others around you who do that, in which case they're just things become intolerable pretty quick.
Do you think, a lot of people have not been exposed to that path or that ritual? Do you think that it could still have that incredible effect on anyone at any age? So like, myself being, 32, and if I went through a rites of passage like that, do you think it would be able to have the effects that it obviously does when you have at a younger age, or you think it's one of those kind of rolling things?
I know a lot of people who haven't had the opportunity to go through law until they were much older, So I think Charles Perkins is no longer with us, a really famous Aboriginal Australian man from Central Desert Mob there. He didn't go through the law until he was quite like an old man, a lot older, and he went through, and you could see that changed him. It does change people. Some people are lucky enough to go through it when they're 14, that first stage. But there's lots of stages after that. Your life, you completely change, like as a human being, every 15 years or so. Your life goes in those blocks.
Is that on a cellular level as much as it is on a personality level?
Yeah. Well, you're completely renewed, your body. Certainly, like, twice in that period, your body's completely renewed.
Yeah.
Every cell is different. Every atom is different. But then you yourself too.
I wanted to because to me, like looking back over like 30 years, it's you start to, I start to hear about these things of rites of passage and narcissism, and you look at what's around and then how that all ties in so well with the educational system that a lot of people have been put through. And then it brings to light this idea that, this educational system was predicated on how to, formulate people or structure people into a workforce that was many decades ago. And I recently watched that documentary, In My Blood It Runs, and the young lad there in Alice Springs, how it was just so confronting watching this kid go through school and the things that teachers were saying to him, and how he just he was just, it just wasn't his way of growing. It wasn't made for him at all.
He refuses to be domesticated.
Yeah.
And that's what school does. It takes these children who are born human, as all of us. They're born as this perfect being. It takes them and just beats the wild out of them. It constrains them. But I talk about the process of that in the book and how it developed.
Yeah. Which was incredible. That blew me away.
It was the only way that these big nations could be formed. To go for civilization to progress beyond sort of city-states and regional groups and just these sort of half-assed empires to actually progress into nations. And from there to an international sort of globalist thing. That was only possible by domesticating the population. And so, the young boy there, he's still a human being. He hasn't been domesticated yet. And so they have to put increasingly punitive, increasingly forceful things to try and break him. And he won't be broken. And unfortunately, that means he's going to have quite a bad time his entire life. He'll probably end up in jail and, et cetera, et cetera. He's going to have a bad time. They're going to get him. He's not going to live as long as everybody else because the society itself and the economy is hostile to anybody who isn't domesticated. So schooling's really important, and you see this with lockdown. It was kind of the most important thing. You know, there's all these restrictions on things that everybody try and make sure that this as soon as possible the schools were open back up. You know, it's like, no, it's fine. The young people can't catch it. They catch it, but it doesn't hurt them. They just carriers. So we're going to get them. We've got to put them all together, hundreds of them in, thousands of them in one place every day, and then send them home to you out of that petri dish. You know, but I mean, they must have known that schools would be one of the biggest vectors, you know, for COVID-19. But they just went, even though, we'll happy to burn the economy for a while. But if we don't keep these kids in check, if we don't continue their process of domestication, then the entire system is going to collapse. Schooling is the most important thing to actually keep all this horror show going.
Yeah,
but and it's just busy work. You know, the kids as soon as they shifted, when they were on lockdown and they shifted to online, they were getting all their day's work done in like an hour and then just stuffing around, you know. And so then they had to go, okay, no, we're going to need you in front of the screen. We're going to have eyeballs on you, and you know, you'll complete a bit of work, and then you'll have to sit there, and then we'll give you the next bit. We're going to eke it out throughout the day because you have to be controlled. And you have to be broken, and you have to be contained. We don't want you running around and outside, bloody becoming human again. So and that's, I mean, there's, as you know, there's a big chapter on that. You're talking about how your ancestors pretty much invented that system.
Yeah, incredible, hey?
Unification of Prussia and Germany all came out of that, and then that spread like wildfire throughout the world. The Prussian model of education, that was the first public education system, and they exported that all around the world. And that was very firmly grounded in the doctrine of eugenics, which they'd invented over there as well. So that the white supremacy science, and that also helped spread that throughout the world. People liked that model because it enabled Prussia to have a large standing army, a permanent standing army, and nobody had ever achieved that in human history before, because people won't do it. They'll be like, yeah, I'll fight in the spring and the summer. Dude, I got to get home and harvest my crops. I want to see my children. Fuck you, I'm going home. You know, nobody would ever stand for it before. But when they implemented these systems of social control, and they domesticated and stupefied and zombified the population, then it was possible to have a permanent standing army. You could have someone who's always in the army. They're always in uniform, and that's who they are now. You can have someone who's always in the factory. They're either fucking working or they're asleep, you know. And then you have control. Then you can have a nation of millions of people who are all speaking one language, no matter what region they live in, and are all just doing the same thing. It's just awful.
It's incredible, eh? When you break it down like that. And then the addition of the adolescent years to string that point, like it comes back to that rites of passage where you say you're 14, you go from that childhood-ish state to the adulthood, but they went the opposite way, and they lengthened that period resulted in this adolescent years. Yeah.
So it's an emergence that happens. So I can't speak for women's business, but for young men, it's like, bam, that's it. You're done with childhood. And we're not going to sit around until you're 26 for you to grow a frontal lobe. You grow that fucking frontal lobe right now, boy. and that boy is shocked into, it's a development that happens straight away. You know, so you have to start growing your frontal lobes after that first initiation. You don't get to just hang around being a dickhead, riding your quad bikes on sand dunes and bloody throwing beer cans into the sea until you're 26 and go, oh, probably shouldn't have done that. Yeah.
Can you speak to that some more, mate?
Women develop frontal lobes sooner, modern women, than men, like years before. You know?
Yeah. They're far superior in many ways. I'd say.
Well, it's not just that. It's that they have to go through a lot more trauma. They have to deal with a lot more stuff. They have to deal with more. Would you want to be a woman in this society?
For a number of
I
reasons,
think
I'm very
I'd rather
grateful.
be anything else. Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about, eh? You know what's going on. It's going on out there. Women are are just facing a horrendous existence.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
sister brings that to light a good number of times for me, and has done in the last few months.
Yeah.
The and it's forced me to look into that more for sure. The role that women have in this society now, and how
Mm.
I think you've spoken to it a few times before, and there's so many elements to it, far out, like the unpaid work that they do, the amount of emotional stress that they carry compared to
Yeah.
like a male, and how that is, it never turns off. It's a running tap forever, and
Yeah.
it
And
builds in.
it's also just that constant. They know they're being judged the whole time. So I could, so what, like, so when our first child was born, my daughter, that would, I'd, so I'm like, oh, well, I'm doing my fair share, because I'd take the baby with me to work. I'd be like, well, I'm looking after the baby. So, mum's got a full day free there, and I don't know. So I'd be delivering lectures like at university while I was holding a baby, and everybody just thought that was gorgeous. Oh, that's so sweet. You are such a good dad. But a woman doing the same thing, she doesn't get the same response.
No.
She's like, yeah, that's really unprofessional. That's really unprofessional. Is she even married? Slut.
Wow.
That's really unprofessional. It's so women are constantly being judged. I've never been accosted in the street. Like, I'm often out in the street with my babies and taking it for long walks with a pram or whatever. I've never been accosted by anybody like telling me I'm parenting the wrong way or something. It happens to my woman twice a week. Someone yelling her at the street, "Are you you're a bad mother." There's just this weight of judgment, and they feel that gaze on them. So even when they're inside, so they're in their house, and it's just like, and I'll say, yeah, I'll vacuum the floor. 5 minutes are done. I'll vacuum the floor. But she's not doing that. She'll stand there for an hour vacuuming the same spot. And I'm like, what are you doing? And it's like she has to do that work because she knows she has that feeling of that gaze upon her, that she's being judged, and someone's going to be like, yeah, no, her house is filthy. She's not. But then for an Aboriginal woman, so my woman's Aboriginal, so there's that extra layer of government on top of that, where they send people to your house to inspect, to make sure the kids are okay, and and they're ticking boxes, going, yep, dirty floor, choking hazard, sharp corner, and you can have your children taken away. The stolen generations was not something that happened in the past. There are more Aboriginal children taken from their families today than at any time in Australian history. So I know we had the stolen generations, and there was an apology, and everybody goes, all right, that's over. But there are more kids in custody now from our communities than at any time in Australia's history, than at the height of the stolen generations, which was, and more deaths in custody than at the height of apartheid in South Africa. It's just these horrendous layers. So if you're a woman, and worse, if you're an Aboriginal woman, the weight of the gaze of the society on you, it's always there. But even if you're in your own house with the curtains closed, it's still there. There's that eye on her the whole time, and she can never stop. It doesn't matter if that floor's been mopped, she got to mop it again. And that's where I can't match her.
Yeah.
I can't do my fair share. There's no fair share because I don't have that fair share of the weight of judgment of a whole society on me. I mean, I do in other areas, but that's a different topic.
Is that something that could ever change?
Well, I mean, I guess if you had the lockdown last for like 6 months and no one could go to school, and if at the same time there was a big electromagnetic pulse that wiped out the entire digital infrastructure of the planet, which happens, it's every 500 years or so, you get one of those from the sun. And the last one was about 700 years ago, so we're due for one, and I'm looking forward to it.
Bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on.
No more podcasting, mate.
People are absolutely, yeah, we could sit at an actual fire and talk. How awesome would that be?
That would be good.
Yeah.
What yeah, so because there is a lot of that going on right now in the world. You see, there's some huge movement in America. It's come over and definitely taken stage in Australia as well, which is it's fantastic in many ways. It also is just very, very hard to watch and understand. And even what you've just said then about the stolen generation, that sits so heavy as a reality and a truth.
Are you referring to like sort of the BLM kind of inspired stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's two kind of movements. So there's people who are forming permaculture cooperatives.
Yep.
And building the next game.
Yeah.
They're building the next system and trying to find ways to make that work. There's huge. So the P2P thing, the peer-to-peer idea, that it's becoming quite a movement. This idea of fuck servers. We can have our computers talk to each other, but then in our human relationships too, we don't want any mediators or administrators in between our human interactions. We don't want any institutions in between that. We want to go peer to peer. And so for that, they reference this idea of the commons, and they look back to feudalism in Europe. And to live as a serf in a feudal system in Europe was actually better than what you have now.
Wow.
Because your serf villages, they were given a plot of land to work by the lord, and they had to give half of the produce that they did to the feudal lord. But that was a reciprocal arrangement, because then he was supposed to give them protection as well, from bandits and warlords and stuff like that. At the same time, they had a commons. There was a common land that everybody shared together, and they all grazed and grew their own crops there, and they actually had their own thing going on, and no single person owned it. No one was the boss of it. They all just worked it together. And so this idea of digital commons and collectives and cooperatives and stuff like that, who work on that principle of the commons, that's really taken off. But the greater movement is kind of it's different. The one that the big mob of people are participating in, it's a lot different, and it's based on a flawed premise. It's based on the idea that we could keep this society, but we could tweak it a little bit to make it fair. So hang on, you're proposing that you're going to take a system that depends on inequality for its infinite growth. Like, it depends on demand exceeding supply in order for there to be economic growth. Mm-hmm. So that means there has to be more people needing the basic things to survive than there are people who have it. So you need inequality for this system to function. Yeah. There's a whole heap of people, this progressive movement, liberals, even anarchists now, they've been sucked into it, this idea that they can tweak a few things and make it more fair. Oh, we'll just tweak things and make it a rule that women have to be equal. We can, say, okay, well, you can't be racist or whatever. They think that they can force the society somehow to make these concessions, and that the society that depends on inequality is somehow going to be able to continue to function. Yeah. So it's just like, oh my God. There's a lot of energy going into something that can go nowhere. It's the entire thing has to come down. There is a community called the Game B community. I don't know if you've ever come across it, but
I
it's a
have
lot of
not.
really big thinkers, complexity theorists, quantum physicists, economists, bloody software engineers, everything, who are really, really exploring and doing the hard yards of the thinking and the science and all the scholarship and practical action that has to happen to actually build models of what game B would look like, assuming that the system that we're in now you would call game A.
Yeah.
So what would game B look like that would function differently, and how can we actually move into that? There's a lot of people working on that problem in the world right now. But then but most people just want this system, but want it to feel a bit more fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a flawed premise. It can't be fair. This is not a system that can be fair.
Well, I mean, doesn't that speak into, all these guys of incredible, and I say guys, so very silly, all these guys and girls with all this incredible intelligence who would be working on that kind of theory. And then how does that speak to like bringing it back to indigenous knowledge to, I don't want to say simplify a complex system, but to just understand the complexities of what we have in a circular world and circular system, and use that as the power instead of making more maths equations to try and understand a different game.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where emergence comes in.
Yeah.
If you've got enough people who are behaving as nodes or agents or whatever you want to call them do in a complex system, enough people who are following those basic operating protocols, then you'll have all those combinatorials happening and you will have emergence. You'll have emergence of right pattern, of right law, of the law of the land will pattern itself through those activities. So that's all I try to do with the book.
Yeah.
Is to try and give people a glimpse of the pattern of creation and to see the fragments of that pattern within themselves, and then to just begin to extrapolate those patterns outwards, to spiral them out, to connect back to the living landscapes that they inhabit, no matter how much concrete's on top of it, and to respond to weather, not just climate, this abstract thing that people think they can measure and somehow control, but weather, seasons, the air around you, the temperature, what's flowering, what's not flowering, the other things that are happening, start to come into an awareness of that and live a life that's embedded in that, but in all of the things around you in creation, not just the natural things, and then to connect up to make those pairs, many, many, many pairs that you have, and then have those combining and recombining and doing amazing things. It has to emerge. You can't plan it. See, and that's the flawed premise of the game B people, is that they think they can plan it.
Yeah.
They think they can design it. Like, I love their work, and it's most of the podcasts I listen to are from people associated with that, because it's just great thinking. But it still has that flawed premise of thinking that, a mind or a group of minds can design that solution, neocortex way. It's like, nah, you're going to need more than gray matter here. You're going to need all kinds of matter, even the stuff you can't see. Yeah. And it's something, we it's got to emerge from complexity. Not be thrust out of complicatedness.
I think I remember you recalling a story of a certain catfish that you go and catch, and how the fat of that catfish is medicinal, but you can't. And I'll let you take it if you can recall that story for us now, because it just blew my mind how catfish related to mosquitoes, which related to the burning of the grass.
Yeah, that was on the Douglas Rushkoff Team Human one. Yeah, that was just like because you're thinking about, there's bushfires, so we need to burn off these grasses and fuel load that builds up. Where do you do it? How can you do it? When do you do it? But if you're embedded within a landscape, it just happens all at the right time. So I gave the example of there's this a place that I know where there's just it's just a time when the catfish there are really fat, and the fat is really good medicine for you. And there are other things there to gather at the same time. There's mangroves nearby where you've got the mud shells and long shells you collect there, and all kinds of things. But so you go to that place to get the catfish, but there's mosquitoes in that season there that just make it unbearable. You can't even approach. So you burn the grass, but it just so happens that that's the exact time where the grass seeds have dried and dropped already, and the grass has started to die off, and the grass seeds have sort of gone into the dirt a bit, and they haven't sprouted yet because they're still choked out by the rest of the grass. But if you happen to burn that grass off at that time, well, yeah, you get rid of the mosquitoes so you can get to the catfish, and that's why you're burning it. But at the same time, you're actually those grass seeds are activated by the heat. But then it happens to be in the same season where there's a heavy dew every night. So that moisture from the dew will actually sprout the seeds. But at the same time, the particular smoke from that particular grass is the thing that activates the seeds of those trees that grow there in that sandy soil. So those trees are seeding at the same time as well. And those seeds are activated by the smoke from that grass. And so then they do their thing, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
And then other people will see the smoke from that fire and go, oh, it's going to be cold tonight. Because of all those interrelated things.
Yeah.
Is that weather or climate? What is that? To be able to make those predictions, because you're living in that interrelatedness, and that at that time when all those things are happening, that smoke is a signal that shows you, okay, it's going to be fucking cold. It'll be a cold night tonight, and it is. It's a cold night.
It speaks into I think you were also mentioning, it speaks into symbiosis and the states of symbiosis and then states of homeostasis and that flux and how the world and the land moves in those cycles.
Yeah.
And
it does. Homeostasis, there's that stability, but then they're always in systems, the periods of hysteresis happen where there's disruption.
Yeah.
So I regard this civilization blip, which has just been the last 5 minutes of human history.
Yeah.
It's just a period of hysteresis, and the next iteration of the systems we live in, will settle faster than you can even imagine. After all this comes down, and it will come down. It's coming down now.
So, with that kind of a thought in mind, I'd love your take on the use of the word sustainability and how we can use what in a sustainable, to use that in a way to live more sustainably and to use knowledge that has tens of thousands of years old.
Yep.
I'd love you to riff on that, because I know that you've got some thoughts.
Yeah. It's just amazing. It's like it's just one of those sexy words that you tack onto any proposal you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sustainable. So, a really good example, I was asked to do a submission for the office of the chief scientist or whatever was putting together, the government report on the Internet of Things that rolled out this year. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the Internet of Things started the idea of having 40 billion devices sort of planted everywhere. to upload every aspect of physical reality in real time to massive servers that are also being built, and that's expected every year after this year. Those number of devices will increase by 4,000% every year. Anyway,
Wow.
yeah, they wanted an Indigenous submission on that, and one of their things was, well, so I mean, you know about rare earth metals.
Yep. Yeah.
And how, so for all this tech that we have, it needs rare earth metals, and refining those rare earth metals produces radioactive waste, etc. And it's all really highly toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's not even thinking about the mountains of e-waste, because every single one of these devices becomes obsolescent in a couple of years and has to be replaced.
Yeah.
So mountains of toxic e-waste. Anyway, but they were saying that it's sustainable because there's things like they'll be able to anticipate better peak water use times and save up to 12% of water usage in a smart city. So this is a sustainability measure. Fuck, brother.
It doesn't really add up, mate. Yeah.
I know. It's just they just chuck it around.
Can't we recycle things?
My turning point was being in a meeting where they were it was a big city council. The meeting was about how can we double the population of this city in 10 years sustainably. And it's like, you're gonna double this bastard every 10 years sustainably. Do you know? Have you? So I tried to tell them what the exponential function was. If anybody doesn't know about the exponential function, just look it up. Check out the formula, do a couple of calculations, and go, oh, yeah, we're all going to die. That's really, really bad. You don't double anything sustainably.
No one wants to die. No one wants to die.
You can't even look. There's not even even 1% growth is not sustainable.
As we currently stand, or is would it have one day?
Anything. If you had, a tiny little tribe of 10 people on a vast continent, and that tribe was decided that it was going to do 1% growth every year. Within an amazingly short time, that whole continent would be wrecked.
Yeah.
Growth is not sustainable, but increase is, and that's the difference. So the Indigenous paradigm is not a growth-based paradigm; it's an increase paradigm. So what you do is you increase the connections within the system. You don't grow the size of the system, but I said before, if you've got a system with 1,000 units in it, there's 1 billion combinatorials of 3.
Yep.
You just keep growing. You just keep increasing the connections. If you want to be smarter, you don't grow a bigger brain. You just increase the number of neural connections you have. And there's trillions of potential ones, so there's heaps of room to move in there. And that's it. You increase your relationships. That's where your wealth is.
So if we were to apply that to someone, your next door neighbor who's taken out the bins, and he goes, "Yeah, Tyson, mate, I read your book. How do I apply that sustainability thing to my life?" You're saying that it's in the relationships and the connections.
Yeah, and that doesn't just mean oh, let's have a hug. Relationships like who you're friends with or whatever. That just means all exchange of energy, matter, resources, everything. So I use an economic example would be, so in a growth-based paradigm of economics, you have to keep growing the size of the GDP every year. You have to grow the size of the economic system. But in our way, we'd be more interested in increasing the velocity of the dollar. So the amount of times that any given dollar would change hands.
Yeah.
That's an indicator, and any economist will tell you that too. That's an indicator of a very healthy and vibrant and strong economic system. And so if you could exponentially increase the velocity of the dollar rather than the amount of dollars in the system, you would have a healthy economy. But at the moment, we've had a decade of, globally, we've had a decade of quantitative easing where they just keep printing more money.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to make a soft landing out of this global financial crisis, which is still here, by the way, and it's about to get worse. They're trying to make a soft landing by just inflating and inflating and inflating the size of the system, which that's called a bubble. Anyway, and bubbles burst.
They do.
But if they were, I mean, so, you know, as applying Aboriginal thinking logic to that, I would say, well, you need to experiment instead with perhaps qualitative easing. What would that look like? You know, how would you increase the velocity of the dollars that we have to make the economy healthy?
Mm-hmm.
And
I guess we could all find a role to play in that if we were to look into it, but it would involve everyone or a lot of people to work together on that to then, as you say, create that emergence.
Yeah.
Mate, that's something to chew the fat on at a later stage. That's for sure. Or now, you know, definitely.
Yeah. Well, anytime you can apply it to anything. You know, so if that guy was out of the bins going, "Hey, I read your book. How do we apply that?" And I'm like, "Well, how can everyone in this neighborhood? How can we manage our waste better?
Yeah.
You know, how can we, get together and do that? And can we get somebody? Can we assign a different person every week to follow the recycling truck to see where that actually fucking goes?"
I was waiting for recycling to come up as a topic.
Yeah, you know, and then what do we do? Yeah, so it's it would be things like that, I guess.
Yeah. It's there seems to be a lot of things that we are very good at hiding from ourselves, the reality, right? And you know, I'm not saying no one's perfect at it, but we've got a pretty good system in place that allows us to open a lid, put something in it, close the lid, and pretend that it's gone. And like you say, this recycling system, it gives us all a nice fuzzy feeling, but at the end of the day,
we got two lids now. That's awesome.
I think we've got 3.
Recycling meant we could double the amount of our waste
and feel good about it.
It meant instead of just filling one bin every week, you could fill 2 bins. And then some of the stuff in that recycling bin won't go to landfill. Some of it's going to go into a factory somewhere and go through this horrendously toxic process. Where you turn 10,000 shopping bags into one park bench by burning 10 tons of coal for the energy to do that, and using 1 million liters of water in the process as well, because that's sustainable. And that's all these people who've been lucky enough to get enough education to be in the middle classes, that's where we want their heads at. We want them just policing each other and everyone else about whether or not people are recycling. These middle classes who are supposed to be, observing the system and holding, its institutions accountable. Instead of doing that, we want you laterally policing each other. It's not good.
I've definitely sustainability. A recycling police, mate. I've got a badge and everything.
Yeah,
there it is.
Nice.
There's my badge. Recycle badge. Where's your keep cup, mate? Where's your keep cup?
Your keep cup.
Mate, I really wanted to speak to you about one topic that I've been personally studying a fair bit lately and trying to understand. I know it kind of backtracks a little bit on our conversation before about people's roles in society and things like that, but and it ties back again also to the concept of rites of passage and things, but the role that men have adopted in society today and and how that energy is not very well understood and harnessed in many ways. And there seems to have been a lot of destruction that's come out of the power that men have been given in this world, and the way they understand how they can use it. How do you see that men's roles today exist in society, and how that could be a much healthier existence?
Well, I mean, you use the word adopted, like we've all adopted this way of being male, like we had a choice in the matter, like we all got together and went, hey, fellas, you want to do this like patriarchy thing? It's going to be deadly. Well, we didn't do this. I know you didn't choose it. At what point in your life was there a meeting or something? Because I wasn't invited to that meeting where we all decided we were going to be like this. And I'm sure that women didn't have the same meeting either. We've all been molded into this. We've all been domesticated into these weird, stupid shapes that do not fit us very well. So, this, I don't know, this sort of globalized norm of Western femininity, that's been imposed on women. They've been, trained and flogged into, from birth into expressing femininity in this certain way that we're all supposed to regard as natural. But that's not natural. My aunties back home don't do that. That's not how femininity is, and it's the same with masculinity. I'm here in the city and there's just bros everywhere. I'm sorry, but my bros back home don't play that. That's not how that works. Although a lot of it, it doesn't matter how remote your Indigenous community is. You sit some teenage boys down with Grand Theft Auto, for 48 hours and that will introduce some troubling ideas and masculinities into that. So we're all kind of polluted with it in some way. But yeah, we're being twisted into this. You mentioned that documentary with the young fella.
Yeah, In My Blood It Runs. Yeah.
In My Blood It Runs. You saw him at home with his mum. So he was a boy, like a strong little boy. But there's a real gentleness and a nurturing, as if so picture that and imagine that unmodified and allowed to grow into a man. That's what a man is. There is a gentleness and a calmness and a nurturance. You saw him in his healing role when he's healing his auntie, putting his hands on to heal her legs and things like that. He wasn't like, I am the shaman. I have come I'm going to fix this woman's legs. He was very, calm, understated, almost what a lot of people would think of in the West as feminine, a lot of the attributes of this boy, and you see it in young boys. There is a lot of that gentleness before it gets sort of this other idea of being male gets flogged into them. And it does get literally flogged into you, and if it's not adults doing it, then the schoolyard will take care of that for you. You'll be shamed or you'll be physically, beaten into replicating this horrendous, bloody, shambolic, shitty version of maleness that we're all forced into. I don't like it, I see myself doing it all the time. It's just in me. It's just bad programming. Yeah, but none of us like it. Who likes it?
Yeah, it's. I think upon reflection, like sometimes you're in that moment of habit, and you don't realize how much of a dick you're being, and then you reflect back on it, and you're just like, well, hang on, what was that all about? That was actually not very cool. But in the moment, it's just like this energy that builds on each other, and that group dynamic that makes you seem like it's the only thing to do. It's
or you have to, or you will be punished. Look, this is how civilizations operate. Like right from the earliest civilizations, the biggest fear of the aristocracy in a civilization is the masses. And the way you control the masses is by controlling the women. And that's a really hard thing for a few nobles and a handful of soldiers to police. So it's really easy. You just give that role to half the population. You give that role to the males, and then that's the it's like, all right, all you males, you're going to have to work your asses off for us, and it's going to be horrible, and you're not going to get very much reward. But here's your reward. You get to be the boss of all these women. You get to be the pater familias for your family, and have power of life and death over them and do whatever you want to them. So it just creates monsters. And then, in male spaces where men are together, as you say, there's that imperative that you have to comply with it or you will be excluded. And it's not much fun being excluded. It's not just that it's not fun. It's that, you lose access to the goods of the society and the economy. Your access is impeded if you're excluded. You don't enjoy the same rights as everybody else. You don't get that job. You don't get invited to that barbecue. Where all the decisions are made and the different roles are handed out. It's it's just a crappy system, and I think everyone's over it. Everyone's sick of it. I see it on the far left and on the far right. I tell you, those two ends of that political continuum are so similar to each other. They're saying a lot of the same things. Like they have a few little different cultural brandings that are just there. They've just been installed to just. You guys can argue about gay marriage. Just don't look at what we're doing with the economic system over here. Don't ignore the fact that we're annexing, that we've illegally annexed Norfolk Island. Are you aware of that? Nobody's aware of that. The New South Wales government, how I told you about the Queensland government just took New Guinea? New South Wales government's done that to Norfolk Island now. Because there's not enough phosphorus. There's not enough. It's one of the last sources of phosphorus in the world. So that needs to be mined, because once the last of that is gone, there's no way to grow food for everybody, because you can't just make phosphorus. So, ignore that. What we want you all to focus on is whether you're for or against gay marriage. Who gives a fuck? Get married, sure. Whatever. The phosphorus is nearly gone. No. We want you to, argue about this and that language choices. So there's a few cultural differences, but the libertarian right has so much in common with the libertarian left that they're all saying the same things, and everybody across the entire political spectrum is absolutely sick of things the way they are. And Trump is going to win again this next election.
Mate.
He is, because he's just able to sidestep everything else. I've seen his last few speeches, and he's just stood up and gone, cancel culture. It's a terrible thing, and half the population vocally agrees with that, and half of the other half of the population secretly agrees with that, and he's going to win. Because everybody's just arguing about the cultural expressions of their political identity, rather than the actual issues that need facing. Oh my God. And it's just going to go around and round and round, and and it's so easy. If you're in power, it's so easy to pull these little strings. So you make sure you get Pauline Hanson, getting up and saying some racist stuff about the people who are in lockdown in those towers over there. They're all immigrants, and they're don't even speak English, and it's their own fault, and they're buying drugs, and I made a prediction yesterday. I just said someone's going to set fire to one of those towers, Nick. That'll be the next thing, when people's attention starts to shift back to the actual reality again. There's got to be another thing.
Yeah.
And so I reckon at least one of those towers is going to burn down, and then everybody's going to be having to argue about that for a few weeks.
Yeah. And
then it'll be the next thing. I mean, when was the last time there wasn't a thing that everybody was arguing about? Do you remember it? Do you remember a week, a fucking day in between these massive crises that we all have to debate about? Remember when it was the river? The rivers were dying, and all the fish were dying in their billions, and that was a crisis. And then it rained. Fuck it, it's bushfires now. The bushfires, and everybody's arguing back and forth about that. And now the smoke cleared, so they're not going to think about that for another 10 years now until the next one happens, 5 years, whatever. And then it's the next thing, that's the next thing, that's the next thing. It's just always, it's a meta crisis, and there's always going to be something. And then for some reason, no one's going to be interested in any of the facts or solutions or actions. All it's going to continue to be is opinion,
Yeah.
And everybody choosing the brand, like, what group do I belong to? What are my intersectionalities? So what language am I using? Or what's our opinions on this? All right, well, I'm going to shout those, and I'm going to destroy anybody else who differs from that opinion, not just in other political groups, but in my own. I'm going to police my own political group and make sure nobody steps over and says a wrong word, or isn't completely with the program, or I suspect that they don't really believe. It's like, oh my God. And it's just going to keep going. But this is just, I don't know if people understand how much they're being manipulated.
I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know if that awareness is there. Do you know anyone who you would say has successfully navigated a life away from being sucked into that vortex and just created, a life independent of that?
Not successfully, because to do that would mean you're isolating yourself and putting yourself out of relation. You would be someone who's out of relation. And so you would just stagnate and wither and die.
Relation with community, or relation with just society?
With with everything.
Everything.
So I mean, if you could find a bit of land that was only 80% fucked, and that you could eke some kind of living out on it, and then you went there, just yourself or maybe your family, and you went and did that, you're condemning yourselves all to death, because you're separating yourself. You're creating an artificial closed system. There's no way. There's a lot of people and they post videos all the time on YouTube where we've made our cabin in the woods, and we're tie-dyeing our own raincoats using our own urine or whatever. It's like, that's great for us. That's awesome. But you're not being, you have to be in it. That's the worst thing.
Yeah.
You have to be in it. And I don't know. And I think there are a lot of people who, wake up to how much they're being manipulated, but then they get together with other people who think the same way about that. And then they form their own little cluster of like-minded people, and they get sucked into that as well. And then they're policing each other and looking at, you're just a shill for the CIA or fuck. I don't know. It's just this pattern. See, I think everybody's operating on, there's a pattern that Donald Trump introduced, which was in The Art of the Deal.
Yeah.
That book he wrote? You should read it. But you don't have to, because we've all done the workshop. And the last few years has been the workshop. And we've all done it. And we've all learnt it really, really well. But basically he has this premise that, if you're going in to negotiate something or communicate or anything, that you have to go in and just make insane, impossible demands.
Yeah.
And switch. They have to think you're crazy. You have to switch, make conflicting, irrational, impossible demands all over the place, contradict yourself, and then you all of a sudden calm down and offer what you really want. And they'll be so relieved that they'll take it, you know. So if you need $100, that's how much it's going to cost to fix this thing. And then you go to the person who's holding the funds and you say, I need $100 to fix this thing. They'll go, no, I can only do 20. Sorry, more than my job's worth. Can only give you 20. Yeah, but that's not going to fix it. No, but here's your 20. But if you go in and say, like, you know, I'm going to shoot all these people in the face. I hate you. I need $10,000 right now. I need it now. You son of a bitch. And you start just wrecking the joint. And then all of a sudden you go, it's all right. Just give me $100. Then they'll give you the $100. And that's the relational principle from which most of the people on the planet are operating right now. And everybody is fucking insane. And that's just this period of hysteresis we're going through. And unfortunately, you have to be in it and of it, or you destroy yourself anyway.
Almost going with the flow of it in some sustainable way.
Yeah, but you just like, I just kind of move through it, you know. Like I just do little things, you know. Like I just make little changes to the pattern where I can. Like I'll introduce something, you know.
What's an example?
You do sneaky little things. Well, the book is an example.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, but I introduce ideas like, so something like, you know, empathy's training wheels for people who don't know how to relate. You know, like a little thing like that. You pop that out there, and it does things. You know.
Yeah. Just a seed.
Yeah, and you know, people used to have a bumper sticker, random acts of kindness and stuff like that. You know, you just have to imagine yourself, you know, moving through the world and kind of subverting it in these little ways, but be really intelligent about how you do it, like things that are going to have a little ripple effect. And but at the same time, you don't want to overthink it. You know, you just follow some basic operating protocols, like I said in the book. You know, you operate on the I said there's 4 principles of an agent in a complex dynamic system. It's just, you know, diversity, connection, interaction, and adaptation. If you're allowing yourself to be changed by the system that you're in and you're adapting, you have that free flow and interaction of information, spirit, resources, energy, everything.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And if you resist, the main thing I do, subversive thing I do is resist branding.
Okay.
So I refuse to have a personal brand.
Okay.
You know, and whenever I feel one emerging, I'll sabotage it. I'll say something terrible, or I'll do something, you know, I just resist it completely. You know, I won't allow myself to have a brand or to be marketed, you know, or to market myself.
Yeah.
You know, I won't be that neoliberal subject. I won't treat myself like a corporation. You know, I won't leverage all my relationships, you know, to speculate on my future. You know, I'm not into futures trading of my soul. I will just be me from moment to moment, which is something that's constantly changing because it's allowing itself to adapt to the things that are around it, you know?
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, just being that in the world and, you know, connecting up with other people and sort of leaving that pattern in them. That's enough.
Yeah, I like that, mate. I do remember that those 4 principles. I put that on my hand, and I used football as a like the story that linked it. And I thought, you know, like
Sweet.
Playing in a football team, you have to come up with all those, like you have to face those 4 different dynamics of connection, like, you know, connecting with your teammates, and then adaptation, because you've got to adapt to other teams and stuff like that. Yeah, I thought it was cool.
Nice, man.
Mate, I just want to pivot on something like completely away from this minefield that is how to navigate this world sometimes. But what's it like for you when you go back home in far north Queensland and you're back on country and like your country? What does that feel like for you?
It depends how long I've been away. So for most of the time, it's only ever been a few months apart, and that's all right. But in the last 3 years, I don't know. Like I managed to go home for and stay for a 3-month period, and then I've been back a couple of other times in the last 3-4 years. But that's not very much.
Yeah.
And it is really hard because especially, as I say, I'm constantly adapting to where I am, and allowing that to happen. So living in the city for the first time has been really hard for me. That has changed me significantly. I find when I go home now, the dogs don't know my smell.
Wow.
Like they don't recognize me for a couple of weeks. I also find over the last 3 years a lot of language loss. Like,
yeah,
I'll wake up and I'll physically feel the loss of a word.
Wow.
What was the one the other day? I woke up and I couldn't remember the word for sand. It was gone, and I'm like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like I don't know what sand is anymore. It's gone because the word for it's gone. And then, but I remembered it later, and it was just such a relief. It's like, chill.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, thank God for that.
Wow.
But I lose words all the time. I can't remember the word for star, like right now. They're just going, and it's not just words, but it's the grammar and the way everything fits together, so that when I speak now, it's just not. It doesn't. I can only do short things, and it's hard. So I'll be home, and for a couple of weeks, it's like, because the language has changed there too, because everybody speaks it differently, and it's a contextual thing too, because your language, it's not like English. Your language isn't naming every single thing; it's referencing contexts, shared context that everyone has. And so, if you haven't been there for 6 months, you don't know the context.
Yeah.
You don't know everything that's happened, even if you're on the phone every other day. You don't know everything that's happened. You haven't been there. So someone can say a sentence and you can understand every word and have no idea what they're talking about. So it takes a few weeks to get back in,
Wow.
And then you've got to exchange all that matter, through your body with the place and eat the things from that place, and then get back into the rhythm of the place. And then your smell changes again, and then the dogs know you again, and then you're back into that rhythm, and then you got to go because, you've got to work because you've got bloody dozens of dependents who need your wage.
Yeah.
It's just it's hard. It's hard going back, but it's even harder not going back.
Yeah.
And this year's stuff, like I was supposed to go back months ago, but COVID and everything.
Yeah.
So nothing now. It's been, I think I've been longer away from home than I've ever been.
What can you do from Melbourne to keep that connection? If you can even,
I've got connect. I don't know. I have to be of this place. I'm getting photos, every other day, like a family doing things, and I'm like, oh, great. So everybody's camping at bloody Wobbedy on the beach there, and oh, that's lovely. You're eating a stingray. Ah, man.
Yeah.
Starting to forget the taste of stingray. It's going.
Yeah.
But but that's just I'm just being sooky about that. It's fine. There are compensations. There are compensations here. So my woman has to live in Melbourne for the next 4 years, and I have to be with her.
Yeah,
I can't not be with her. When I was back home for a few months, I wasn't with her. She was still here, and that nearly killed me. Like I missed her more than I miss home.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think that's how they get you.
That says a lot, mate. That says a lot.
Yeah.
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 Hey, just on one last thing, it's been brought to my attention a couple of times reading certain interviews and listening to a few things, and I don't want to take too much more of your time, man. The lay of the land and rock formation in Australia says a lot about its history and the stories that are predicated on it all, on rocks and the shape and the geometry and everything. Can you just give us a little bit of insight as to why that is and how that came about as to be the way that like rocks are used in Indigenous speaking and story?
Well, it's just, I mean, you're in relation to the rock. And, you know, I said you got those pairs. They're not just with other people. You got non-human as well. So all kinds of animals, plants, but even a rock. You know, you're in relation to that rock, and you can come into relation with that. And so all the rock formations in the landscape, you know, these show where those entities, the creation entities, moved and are moving through that landscape. Now, those entities, those big creation, you know, and you could call them energies or forces or phenomena or anything you like. You can even think of it in terms of microwaves or energies coming from space or from the sun, or, you know, you can think of it as, I don't care what you call it, you know, from your point of view, but there are these forces, these entities moving through the landscape, and they always have. And, you know, those formations in the land mark and map the lines of their travel. And you can sit there and those beings, as they move through, they leave a substance. They leave a substance, an essence there behind. And that's a substance of law. That law is in the land, you know, and you know, rocks particularly, you know, hold and are around and within these things. So you can sit there in those places. If you're in the right state of mind, you know, you can sit there, and if the old people are happy to let you in, you know, if you call out to them, you pay your respects, etc., you know, that essence comes into you, that substance comes into you, and it invigorates you, it animates you, and always to some extent that is moving through you. So that's the spirit, that's your living spirit that animates your body. That's the reason you can talk and move around and your cells are living, is because of that. It's everywhere, and it's in the land, it's from the land. And I don't think anyone quite, and not many people quite understand what they're damaging when you damage that land, when you do a massive open cut mine, or you know, take down a forest, or you decide, well, we're going to blow up those caves there or these rocks here. That kind of desecration, it disrupts those fields so much that it makes us all sick, you know, because the living spirit that's flowing through us all the time and animating us, that becomes tainted, weakened. It's like a signal, I guess, you know. It's a signal that gets disrupted and breaks up. And you get sick, you get cancers, you get autism, you get asthma, you get peanut allergies suddenly pop up out of nowhere. Hey, how old are you? Like, when I was a kid, there weren't peanut fucking allergies. Like, you'd see a movie about, like, oh, you know, someone who had an allergy, and it's like, oh wow, that's a rare condition. I want to watch that movie. If they eat a strawberry, they'll die. Wow, that's huge. Now it's everyone's got an allergy.
Everyone.
And you can't open a packet of peanuts in a room without 8 people dropping to the floor. You know, EpiPen or whatever. You know, there's a lot of things. There are toxins that are causing all that. It's diet. It's all kinds of things, but it also involves this signal being disrupted. this law. Like the law, it's a lot of things. It's multi-layered, but it's as much a material, measurable, actual substance as anything else, and it's in the land, and it's all around. Yeah.
Unreal. Yeah, I think if we just took that forward and sat with those thoughts and sat on the land and actually tried to understand that, it would be it would plant some small little seeds in some people's minds to hope create some shift.
Well, it's always going through us and telling us how to be, and we all have the same. We all have the same. Pick up the same signal. We all have an aversion to the idea of a king or a boss lording it over us. That's part of that law. It's a pattern of being and how to be in relation to existence.
Yeah.
We're all attracted to powerful places of natural beauty. We're all attracted to, eating uncontaminated foods, if any of us eats a fish in the right season, the pig fat season, we all feel that same rightness about it. We all know it's there. That law is going through us all the time, and we all know it. It's just a matter of allowing yourself to live it without insisting that your story or your opinion is the way that everybody should be. You got to resist that branding, of your ideologies and everything else. That's when the greater than thing comes in, and it's just lawlessness. Without that law, without that substance, we got nothing.
Yeah.
So that's rocks.
Far out rocks, big one. What if we were, Tyson? If we were gonna give this chat a name, what would you call this chat that we just had? If we were to give this podcast a title, what would you name it?
Just never name anything.
Yes.
It's got to be no brand. As soon as you name something, it's fucked because it has a brand, and then people can just take the name, like sustainability, and they can put it on anything.
Right.
Sustainable nuclear weapons. Nah, just don't give it a name.
So good. Oh, mate, I love that. I guess we'll just leave it blank then.
Yeah.
Can we give it your name though? But we're going to put your name on it.
I don't know, man. You do it any way you like.
All right.
I don't know. It's just a yarn.
It is, mate. It is, and I very, very, very much appreciate your time and having a yarn. It's like, you definitely planted some seeds. You were successful in that, and I hope that, I hope we can just take this snapshot in time and then maybe pick it up a few years down the line and
definitely. And it is just a moment in time,
Yeah,
because it's done now. We were the only ones here, so other people might listen to a recording of it, but that's just what it was. We're the only ones that carry this now, so we're in us too, and everything that we have in this yarn that sits between us, and that's knowledge. Next time I see you, both of us will remember all of that.
Yeah. So now we just wipe that sand, that drawing away, and we just move on to what's going to be next.
That's the protocol. Yeah.
That's awesome. Tyson, thanks so much, mate.
No worries, bud. See you.
Thank you. Well, there we go, guys. Tyson Yunkaporta. Someone I feel like I could talk to for days and learn a whole life of knowledge in 1 minute. So I really hope you got something out of the conversation, and I hope it plays into your own conversation going forward. Thanks a lot for tuning in all the way up to now. If you do have anything to say about the podcast, please reach out to us at Stokely Podcast on Instagram. And until next time, keep well, stay brave, kind and awkward, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Ciao for now.